announce that. So this is the Warner Archive Collection presents Young Justice down here in the Hero Complex Pavilion. Hero Complex, part of LA Times. We do genre, entertainment, stuff like that. I'm going to just go down the list here. It's not even in any particular order because it's one of the biggest panels you'll probably see, maybe ever. But it's great though. It speaks to the love that everybody here has for the show. And after it's been over. And that's the other thing. We're going to make sure that this is like a celebration of Young Justice, that we're talking about, how great it was and not ask questions about, oh, well, is this going to happen? Can we see this happen in the future? So that's always the talk, but we're here to kind of celebrate that. And we're here to announce that there will be season 2 on Blu-ray coming up later this year for everyone. And I'll have more about that towards the end. We may have some special fun giveaways on that announcement too. Okay, so I'm just going to go down the list here. So we still have so much love. So first we have Phil Barassa, who is he was the Emmy-winning character designer. Raise your hand. Okay, we have Cameron Bowen here? Yes, we have Cameron here, the voice of Robin, Tim Drake. We have Chris Carter, who was a composer on the show. We have Nicole Duke, who's the voice of Iris West Allen. We have Dead hasn't made it yet. Voice of Ra's al Ghul. He made, We have Kevin Greavious here, the voice of Black Beetle. We have Kevin Hawks, one of the writers of the show here. We have Brighton James, voice of Virgil Hawkins or Brandon Static. We have Josh Keaton, voice of the Black Spider. We have Curtis Miller, Curtis Collar, the talent coordinator. Back there. Okay. And we also have here Eric Lopez, voice of Blue Beetle, Tiny Whale. Sarah as well. We have Michael McQuestion, another composer on the show. Jay Surratt. Jay is, yes. No, okay, we have Mark Rolston, voice of Lex Luthor. Jason Isak, voice of Kid Flash. James Arnold Taylor, voice of Flash, Newton, Thompson, two other voices. We have Brandon Vietti, producer and writer on the show. We have Greg Weissman, producer, writer, and voice of Lisa Pye. And we have David Wilcox, line producer. Okay, so it's probably going to be tough to go down the line and ask individual questions to each person. So I'm going to kind of do it as a group, as groupings. So I'm going to talk to some of the producers and talk about just some of the challenges of getting the show on the air in the first place. Because it was a tad bit different than in the comics that people would have known. But were there any particular challenges or obstacles in terms of getting the show? Getting it up and running. Maybe we can start with Brandon.
Why don't we start with Brandon?
Okay.
Challenge is getting the show up and running.
Yes.
I don't know, creatively, I think just the challenge venturing into the DC universe once again in animation and trying to come up with something new and different that we haven't seen before, and something that doesn't step on all of the really, really great DC animation that's come before us. So that was a lot of discussion about that internally with our bosses at Warner Brothers, Sam Register, with DC, many of the great guys at DC, Jeff Johns, Mike Carlin. So a lot of discussion just about what do we do with the DC universe that hasn't been done. We had some discussions about maybe a Justice League, but we weren't really, Greg and I were very intimidated by that. Bruce Timm's Justice League had not been taken off the air. It wasn't that long ago that it had ended, and there's no way we wanted to jump right into that because it was huge footsteps to fill. So Sam Register had actually kind of come up with the idea of a younger version of Justice League, and Young Justice started to, I think, spin out of our minds, Greg and I, as we got together and started to think about the possibilities of what you could do with a young team of superheroes, of sidekicks. And that's kind of how things started. It was a difficult process, actually. Greg, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, intimidation is an underestimation. You know, I mean, we, on the one hand, we had the Justice League and Justice League Unlimited. On the other hand, we had Teen Titans, which had also been this great show about teenage heroes. Obviously, those shows are very different, but they were both terrific and very well executed. And that left us terrified, as I recall. You know, Sam suggested it and thought we'd be very enthusiastic, and I think that we were just frightened. But Brandon actually is the one who I think solved the problem when he came up with this idea of this covert ops team. And that gave us a different way to spin it, so that for us, the show was first and foremost a spy show. Second, a show about teens, that we would try and make, at least emotionally, the show as realistic as possible. And only third, a superhero show. So, and we began then together to come up with the whole thematic idea of secrets and lies, the whole idea of of grounding the show as much as possible, given that it was a fantasy, science fiction superhero show, grounding it in reality in all sorts of ways. And maybe Phil and Brandon could talk about costumes for a second, but you know, things like the timestamps that we did, and Teen Titans had been a show about 5 teenagers in a tower, kind of with no parents and a bit in a vacuum. So we wanted to do a show that was about secrets and lies. We wanted to do a show that was about proteges and mentors, about growing up, about coming of age, and making that transition. And so on that level, we wanted to make the show as real as possible, and I think the costuming is a good example of that, so maybe you and Phil could.
Yeah, Phil and I talked quite a lot about the costumes going in and how we could use those as an anchor to reality. So
yeah, so I guess what Brendan and Greg are talking about is the practical nature of the outfits and the design. When they first brought me in, you know, it was just about trying to, you know, get inside their headspace, and between the three of us, you know, we're not really short on opinions, so those early meetings were interesting. But we really wanted to ground it in reality while still being faithful to the traditions of the DC universe. So the trick is to take something that's iconic and classic and recognizable and turn the dial just enough so that you're getting like this sort of believable, like real world feel without losing what's iconic and recognizable about that classic character. And I think that was the inherent challenge throughout the show. It's like, how much can we tweak this and bring it into, you know, our sort of reality that we're trying to base this in without fundamentally breaking the character and losing the really strong thematic core. So that's something that we worked on, you know, really closely for 2.5, almost 3 years, I think, if you consider development time. And I don't want to oversimplify, but we all approach it slightly differently. Greg comes from, and he has a very classic sense of the DC character. I mean, again, forgive me if I'm totally butchering this and oversimplifying, but we all have a different sort of sensibility going into it. But I think we really, found a through line between all of our thinkings. Brandon was really determined and sort of very sure of how he wanted to approach the character design in terms of like bringing it into this real world feel. And I'm kind of right in the middle with both of those guys. Like, I love the charming absurdity of the old stuff, and I'm really, I love bringing in new elements, as far as what my artistic influences are. So I think, overall it was really this attempt to kind of create this unique synthesis of design styles and influences and create something that, was recognizable as a DC universe, but hadn't quite been done before with some of our newer influences.
Okay, that's good. That's great. Talking about the setting the tone, which is character design does in general, I want to throw it to the composers here. I'll get to the actors. I'll get to that. But I want to throw it to the composers here in terms of coming up with themes, coming up with, I don't know if you had individual themes or individual characters as well, but how was that process, and did you read to get input, of what you would do?
Well, coming up with music for the shows is definitely a collaborative effort. I mean, we want to work with what Greg and Brandon have asked for and come up with a sound for the show that's unique. And we actually had kind of similar challenge because we also had written music for Justice League and Unlimited and Teen Titans. And so also the music needed to have an identity that was separate from that. And so when we sat down to try and develop the music, something that Brandon and Greg both asked for was that it differentiated itself from both Titans and Justice League, and also play up the spy aspect. And so we came up with an approach that was a lot more about sound design and less about orchestra, saving that for when the Justice League steps into that world. And I'll let you expand on that.
Yeah, no, it was great because Brandon and Greg both came to us already with a pretty solid idea of the kind of feeling that they wanted, and they had some examples of things that they really liked that they thought would be great for the show.
To be fair, it was really Brandon.
Okay.
This was Brandon was the genius behind figuring out the take, and I sat back and watched, so I don't want to take credit for it.
Well, you said yes, sure, go ahead.
No, I loved it. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to disown it. I'm just saying that he's smart and I listen.
Well, he was very smart because the CD that he had put together for us to listen to and for us to really sort of get an idea of what he was thinking about was so very different than anything we'd ever done, which is scary and is also very exciting because it was sort of a completely different approach to what you would think of as like, superhero show, we need a superhero sound. Well, it wasn't about that. I think, like you guys said, it was superheroes third, and so because of that, we had other things we wanted to say with the music and with the tone of the show first. And it was really much more about the whole spy thing. And it was more about energy and pulse and sort of this uncomfortable feeling and, that kind of thing. So yeah, it was a really interesting and fresh way for us to think about doing superhero music, and we had a blast.
Okay, thanks. So for some of your actors that are here, in terms of I kind of want to go down the line, but I'm not going to go down the line. And also we have joining us here Oded Fair, who is the voice of Robin Hood. I kind of want to know, coming into it, where was your level of fandom? How much have you read before? How much have you watched before? I guess I'll just throw out, let's go with Cameron. Voice of Robin, right? Let's start with you.
I'd always been a fan of DC. Growing up, I watched like Batman animated series and Batman Begins. I was a big fan of Batman in particular because he was a superhero that didn't have any powers. And I also liked Robin. There were a lot of attributes that I admired about him as well. But as far as Young Justice was involved, I didn't know what it was, and when I booked it, because I did an audition for the show, they made up a different show. I had to look it up and watch the whole series, and I was blown away, and I was so excited to be a part of it. But I really didn't know what it was because I'm not a big comic reader, yeah, that's it.
That was genius. I'm going to try and follow that. Playing Kid, I knew of Kid Flash as a character, and of course, who doesn't know of the Flash and the Speedster lineage? And I actually have to confess that the Speedsters were one of my favorite types of superhero character. Probably because I won't shut up and I'm always talking. But it's true. It's true. And a big idiot, which is true. But I hadn't actually seen Teen Titans, and I hadn't seen what the recent fare surrounding the DC Universe was, in specific to the Don't Call Us Sidekick characters. And so coming to it, like Cameron, what compelled me so much was the story of how realistic the characters were and their involvements and their interactions were, that they were superheroes third. They were teenagers first and foremost, and that I think regardless of what you come to it with allows you to achieve exciting and real and emotional with the characters. And so that really was, I think, our primary focus, and, much less on what had come before. And like Craig and Brandon, pioneered something a little bit different, and it was an enjoyable, an incredible thing to create.
I'll jump in. I was a huge fan. I have my stack of Flash comics from day one as a kid. Green Lantern, Flash, all these were my favorites. Justice League, and I was always, I've been very blessed to play a lot of very cool characters as a voice actor through the years. X-Men world and Spider-Man and all that. But the Flash was one of those elusive ones for me. I always wanted to play the Flash, always wanted to play it. And I got to play it on this show, but I was coming in replacing an actor for it, who was one of those fancy on-camera actors, and you know how they do. And so I had to voice match him and his acting beats. And I was like, all this time, my whole life, I was like, how would the Flash sound? How would Barry Allen sound? How would he be? Okay, hey, that's good. No, all of that's out the window. I've got to match now what this other actor was doing, which was still fantastic and fun and just so cool. Because I got to do other characters throughout the show while we were doing it. And always coming in and seeing all these guys. Anytime you voice something, it's great when you walk in and you get to see the person after you've heard them, right? But when you walk in and it's a room of superheroes, it's like, oh, you're Kid Flash, you're Green Lantern, you're Green Arrow, it's like, I freak out, and so then I'm like, I get to play the Flash. I remember it was the last, was it Greg, was it Brandon, do you remember which episode? It was like 2 episodes, the last 2 episodes where I got to do Flash, and it was awesome. So I'm thrilled, I was thrilled, and I'll shut up now because I'll do the same. That's part of the Flash thing.
Whip, Spidey, whip.
What's that?
Whip, flip. That's the sound.
Flip, yeah.
That's the sound that makes.
Okay. I don't know if anybody else wanted to jump in on that, but I had another.
I'll jump in real quick. I've been a huge comic book fan since I was a kid, and actually, gotta confess, I didn't read comic books until I was about, I think I was in high school. I bought them for the artwork because as an artist, I'm an artist, but not professionally. And I bought them for the artwork. I taught myself how to draw through comic books, so I was a huge fan. I started reading them, and then they just blew me away. So I was huge into DC. I equally Marvel, DC, but more DC. Just I don't know why. I just like the characters more. But so coming into this, I was super excited. And when I found out that it was like Cam, we came in, we auditioned for these characters, we had no idea who they were, and then first session, that's when they told us, this is who you are. They showed us artwork, this awesome artwork, and I was like, man, like you're Blue Beetle. And I was like, and I knew who Blue Beetle was, the new Blue Beetle, because I was like, he's, you know, I'm always rooting for like Latino characters in like comic books and like, you know, movies and stuff. So when I found out who he was, like, oh man, this is awesome. And it was perfect because like he grew up in the Southwest, I grew up in the Southwest, kind of like similar backstory, you know? So I was really excited, and man, it's like the best character I think I've ever played. So there's that. And
I've been a huge comic book fan for as long as I can remember. I knew a lot about Justice League, and I'd seen some of the show, but I didn't really know anything about Black Spider at all. He wasn't even on my radar as a comic book character, so I at first thought it was something that was just something that came out of this guy's mind as a little funny joke, and then I found out that it was actually a real character, and I thought it was pretty awesome, and yeah, that's that. I didn't know who he was, but now I do.
Okay, for the remaining actors, just to get, like, you know, start over here with, oh, sorry. I forgot to get your mic, but in terms of the process of voice acting, you know, I guess there's two schools of it. There's the you go into a room kind of by yourself in a little box and you create what you need to create. You have a director that helps you out, a voice director, and then there's the whole, you know, crowd, you know, where you're vibing off of what someone else has done. In terms of just the actual voice acting, the work of it, how was that process for you?
There's a school? I want to go.
I'll say a few words about that because I think I'm probably the least experienced in the voice acting part.
Oh, that is fantastic. Did you guys agree? Fantastic. Cheap applause, come on.
I have to say that the experience for me is always very funny because since I don't get to do it as often as actually, yeah, I come in and you're doing it. You're making the voice and you're reading the lines, and there's all these guys behind a glass window, and you can see them either lean back and they're like, okay, I'm boring them to death. You always hear the. That was great. Thanks. Hold on, just one second. There's a whole argument that's happening in the back there.
They're talking about what they're going to get for lunch, though.
Yes, but listen,
Should we get pizza?
You have no idea. It's something that says, okay, let's do that again. But it really is. It's a great way of acting. Just using a voice. There's some kind of a great freedom to it. It's fun if you don't like makeup. It's really good in that way. No, it's an amazing job. I love it. I think I mean these guys are pretty unbelievable. I feel I always do the same voice for any character I do. These guys come in and it's like, oh my god. So anyway, I'm done.
It's a radio play though when you do a thing like this, you know, as opposed to when you do a video game, you're all alone in the studio. If you do a commercial thing or narration, you're alone, promo, any of that. But for animated shows, most of the time, it's like a radio play. So you go in there and you get to actually live this whole thing with everybody and hear all the voices around you. So it's a trip, and it's so much better because if you do a video game, and most of us do video games, you get kind of isolated in that little padded room talking to yourself, right? So it's like. You go, okay, where am I drawing from and all that, but these guys are all surrounding you with these voices. He's got a very tiny voice. At some point you're getting to speak. That comes out and you're like, I'm in this. So it's fantastic. And this show had a great energy about it in that regard, I think, because of the diverse group of actors they had in it.
Yeah, my favorite part of the being with other actors in the studio is the kissing.
We're not supposed to talk about
that. Could be just me. I don't know. I mean, when you're alone doing that, it's kind of weird. You know. But if there's another actor there, it's okay. Just throwing that out there.
Real quick, I also just, while we're still talking about the acting, we gotta, give it up to Jamie Thompson, the dialogue director.
So I'm going to ask Kevin to answer that question as well, because he has a pretty distinctive
Wait for it.
Well, you know, despite what this young man over here says, I think I have the least experience out of everyone. I didn't audition for the role either. So when I came to it through Jamie Thomerson, I was like, okay, the black people. Now, the first thing I'm thinking, okay, this is a black guy, right? But that wasn't necessarily the case. But I guess I approached it like I approach a lot of the characters I'm asked to play in the voiceover realm, from an aspect of intimidation. What can you be, or what can you do to sound more menacing? And really, all I just have to do is open my mouth. And how it comes. But it was interesting. I had never heard of the character before. I heard of Blue Beetle, of course, his second incarnation, or maybe third incarnation, right? Yeah. And so I just tried to approach it as, okay, this character hasn't been seen in animation before. So, let me be a little bit more menacing. And since he's alien, I said I can afford to be a little bit more cold than I, would ordinarily be. I didn't have to be, I really didn't have to reach that much. It was fun. I think.
What's he sound like? What's he sound like? What would he sound like right here, right now at the language conference? What would he say? What would Black Beat say?
Yeah, so I just have to thank Greg, Brandon, and of course Jamie for the opportunity. It was fun.
I would ask the same question to Nicole, because this is kind of it's a boys club here a little bit. What was that like?
This one works. So I just had a total blast. I was really a writer on the show, and I kept bugging Greg to let me audition because I loved the show so much. And so he finally got me a part on there, and just standing in there surrounded by these guys, it blurred the line for me of like, are these the real characters because you're hearing the voices, or are we all acting? And I'm just thrilled I got to be a part of that, because usually as a writer you're also in a room by yourself with the voices in your head, and now it was real, so yeah, it was fantastic. Actually, in a sidebar, I wanted to mention, Greg, you want to talk about the fake audition? Because I think that's kind of a cool thing.
You mean the Cloud Ninja thing? Yeah, I don't know if it was clear. We had season 1, we held auditions for 7 characters, our 6 original leads, which was Kid Flash, Superboy, and Superman, because we needed someone, since Superboy was a clone of Superman, to be able to handle both the 20-something, 8-year-old Superman and the 16-year-old Superboy with that, and still sound like it was the same guy, but have that difference of age and experience. And then Miss Martian and Artemis and Aqualad and Robin, the Dick Grayson Robin. And we had in that process a number of, shall we say, leaks about what we were doing on the show. And those can be damaging because there's this thing you may have heard of called the internet. And people take very little bits of information and then have a tendency to run negative with it. They know very little, and yet they're already sure we're going to do something really horrible with these characters. So we were determined for season 2 to not allow our audition process to reveal in advance what characters we were adding to the show. So I created an entirely different show that was called something like Cloud Ninja or Storm Ninja. And so there was like Cloud Ninja, which I think was Robin, and a version of the Scarab voice, and Eric did that. So we had these great people come in thinking they were reading for a new Warner Brothers show called something, Cloud Ninja Storm City or something like that. It was like a science fiction ninja show. And we just tried to write the sides so that it would be the kind of thing Robin would say or the kind of thing Virgil Hawkins would say without actually using those names. And we really wanted to not give it away even to the actors what they were reading for. So I ended up writing a lot of material for this Clown Ninja show. None of which, ever gets used, but it allowed us to get these great people to play these parts. So.
You did that twice to me, because I came in and read for Aqualad first, and then came back for the sex.
Well, I did it on Star Wars Rebels too. If you think we were obsessed with security, Lucasfilm is like nuts for security, so they were like,
"This is not the show you're looking for."
Yeah, we couldn't reveal at all that it was a Star Wars show. So I don't even remember, but we made up some. Like it was the Tyranny or something like that. I can't remember now, but yeah, we made up an entirely with different names and different things, and but then Filoni sort of gave it away in the booth because at the callbacks he had all these pictures of Twi'leks and stuff on the wall. So it's like, well,
to be honest, Dave being there is kind of a giveaway.
Yeah,
yeah, that's
This is Ninja Turtles. Why is Dave Filoni?
Who's the guy with the hat? And that's it.
Well, I was going to actually ask Brian, what was the experience like for you to read for?
Oh, the experience was fantastic. Half the time, though, we get surprised of the roles we actually book. But it was great. I grew up a fan of DC superheroes, Marvel superheroes. So I mean, to get the chance to play a character that has a following. I mean, even if you're not a big fan of it, you can go online and see this character that you just booked and see how many people actually do follow it, and how big it is. It's a great honor to even portray a character like that, and then to be in the room, like these guys were saying, to get to actually be in the room and act alongside other actors when you're doing a show and not just be isolated. It's one of the most fun experiences you can ever have, because voiceover actors, in my opinion, are some of the wittiest, most funny, kind, fun people to be around and work with. I mean, we just had a blast. Every job I've ever worked on, I've had nothing but fun. So, it was great.
Another actor question for Mark specifically is, now you're playing Lex Luthor and Jonathan Kent. Characters that are established in many different media for a while. How do you approach, I mean, this could be for anyone that already had an established character too, how do you approach that in particular?
Well, I must confess I'm not really a comic book fan. I was as a kid, so I'm just grateful that Brendan and Greg thought that my voice matched their vision of what Lex should be. But I'd actually played Lex Luthor on another Warner Brothers thing. Like I used to have a crossover happening. But for me, just approaching potentially the most powerful man in the world, I mean, that's a lot to chew on. So, as actors, you let your imagination go wild, and it's quite easy to fit into Luthor's shoes. I mean, the man who has everything. The man who rules the world. So.
For the writers, Kevin Hobbs is here and Nicole as well. You have a pretty diverse, not just a cast, but diverse cast of characters to write as well. I know you get direction from Greg and from Brandon and everyone else, but how? And probably, I don't know if any of you, went on that thing called the internet. And there's often pressure from just fans to write in this character. This person needs to be in. This storyline would be great. So, in terms of for the writers, how do you pick? How were you able to pick which storylines that you wanted to follow and which characters would be integral in those storylines? We'll start with Kevin.
So. I wouldn't go. I appreciate the fans, but Greg's the boss, so whoever Greg said, write this one. So that's what we were right. And then really, I always felt my job was to torment the artists. So I try to write the scripts so that the directors and the artists would, be tortured a little bit with the script. That's really, yeah. I'm a jerk. What can I say? That's it. I see a couple artists out there.
Cool.
So we always have these awesome story break sessions with Brandon and Greg, and a lot of the ideas just kind of grew in the room. And then if something didn't fit into a script, we'd kind of save it for later on a note card and then bring it back in later to something else where it might fit. So yeah, I really steered clear of the internet and fan stuff there because so much was happening in the room. And one of the exciting things on this show for me was that Brandon kept pushing things in a different direction to keep that spy and undercover motif going. So you'd suggest something and he'd say, yeah, I've seen that before in superhero genres. Let's see what we can do through this lens. And for me, it was really exciting as a writer to kind of approach it from that angle. And it was like we were given the chance to create kind of a new view of the whole thing. And of course, whenever Greg has a show, I'm clamoring to write on it because he's a genius and he has such a plan for the show. I mean, he has a plan for 7 seasons in the future.
Point out too, the writing room process is a lot of fun for all of us. I mean, Greg and I do a lot of sort of jamming alone where we kind of work out a lot of big beats and a lot of big vibes. But and while that's,
Kevin was there too for that. Kevin
yes, and while that's fun for all of us to do a lot of that heavy lifting, and we're working out a lot of the big dramatic beats of the stories and the emotional through lines and stuff like that, it really kind of falls to the writers themselves. They come in and they kind of listen to our bigger ideas, but they then have to go sit with those big ideas and fill in everything in between and find like the charm of the characters, the comedy that's in the show, and that is a huge job. A lot of that is, that's the glue that kind of makes it all stick together. It's incredibly important. So we were really, really lucky to get the crew of writers that Greg was able to round up for us. And I learned a lot by working with them, seeing where our ideas started with Greg and Kevin and I in a room, and then seeing how it sort of expanded and matured or got sillier and stupider, because sometimes that's great. That's exactly what you need to make it better. I learned a lot by just watching that process.
I mean, really, I want to really give props to Brandon because Nicole's right. Brandon was always challenging us to make it better. Brandon, I've said this before, and I'll say it till my death. Brandon's always the smartest guy in the room. Truly amazing. It's a little annoying sometimes. For example, Brandon had never written a teleplay before, so in season 2 he wanted to write a teleplay. He wanted to write one of the episodes, and he did, and was almost immediately as good as anyone else we had on the staff. By his second episode, it was like, okay, this guy's great. So that's kind of annoying. That this guy who can draw and is that smart can also write the pants off of these episodes is really great. And then I also want to give props to the real unsung hero of this entire series, which is David Wilcox right here, who was our line producer. And without whom the show would have spun off into non-existence, because David's the guy who makes sure that everything that all these big dreams that Brandon and I came up with actually became a reality. And I don't know, Dave, if you want to take a minute to talk about what your experience was like.
Well, like any production job, in hindsight, it was a joy. But when you're there in the trenches in the middle of it, you want to kill both of them. Every time you get a new script and there's 500 new characters, you're going, oh my God, you're kidding me. But they did in the second season. They did throw me a bone, and we had the one episode that was set in a cave. The entire episode in a cave, one location. 500 characters in the cave, but just the one location, and that was for me. No, it was a joy. It was fun.
And we had to fold David into the DC universe. He is the model for a character. You want to talk about that character a little bit? What was that character like?
That character was me. Yeah. What's the doctor's name?
Dr. Wilcox, he has the watch.
Torturing the kids, torturing Blue Beetle and his friends with the watch around the neck. That was me. They threw me that bone as well.
If you watch season 2, if you haven't seen it already, you pick it up on Blu-ray. Look for this guy. It's exactly like this guy right here. And another quick side note. David wasn't the only model for a character in the show. Phil Barassa was also one of the first characters in the very first episode, frozen in a block of ice by Mr. Freeze.
Yeah, I was like the first dude to get killed in the show. Like I was like barbecuing with my kids or something at a park, right? Put me in some sort of pain. So, yeah, Kevin, you weren't the only one that liked to torment the artist, man. But this dude, he really would. Like, he'd come into my office and he'd be like, "So I'm writing an episode, and it takes place, at a football game, and there's like a marching band, and like then, everyone, and then we time travel and we see versions of all of them in the past." And if you guys can wrap your head around what kind of a production nightmare that sort of thing would be, I mean, we never ended up doing that, but it seemed like he was always coming in with these absurd ideas. But he's so charming. I mean, you gotta love the dude. It's great. We had a great time.
Want to shout out to Owen. I see Owen back there. Stand up. Owen. Owen worked on the show. Is there anyone else here who worked on the show besides Curtis and Owen? Oh yeah, there he is. There's one of our directors. Matt.
I was actually going to ask that if there was anyone, because I was going to ask Curtis out there a question about being a talent coordinator, and that would seem to be a tough job to to coordinate all the talent that's up here. If anybody else that was in the audience that worked on the show wanted to stand up, but we'll ask Curtis this question real quick.
Don't get me started. I was thinking that someone might throw a question to me. I was like, I'm gonna make something deep and poignant about the experience that we had. And the only thing I could come up with was really true, is we didn't cast this show. This show became on its own. It was very organic. Yes, we sent out auditions to the agents and did the whole thing. But we kind of knew, like Kevin, we're like, oh yeah, we don't need to go around town looking for the perfect Black Beatle. There he is, and Oded, we're like, oh man, I hope he's available, because we don't need to ask anyone else, because all these actors here really embodied the characters that they played. So it was actually a very easy, well, other than Greg writing about 25 characters per episode, which was great as a fan. Other than that part, it was a very easy, fun party every Tuesday and pickups. It was just too much fun, and wasn't really work at all. I love all of you guys.
So we have some time, but I wanted to open it up to the audience if you guys had any questions that you wanted to. Oh, there's one right there.
I just want to know if you guys had any rehearsal time at all. No?
Zero. It's pretty by ourselves. Like, we would read through our script, and then we'd show up pretty much blind, and then everything we read, or at least me, everything I would thought I was going to go with it, it's like, no, let's not go that direction. Let's go this way.
It's pretty rare to have rehearsal and voiceover. I mean, you talk about like Greg's working, on Rebels and stuff. And with Clone Wars, we would get the scripts when we walked in the room because it was so top secret. So you did not get to read it. Most of the stuff you hear in Clone Wars, that's the first or second take of us ever reading those words. And that happens a lot with voiceover. And that's why I think voice acting is such an art that, I hope people, kind of see that, because it is. And these guys do a great job, and they walk in and just create out of that. But Batman Breaking the Mold was about one of the only shows I can think of where we actually had a little time to run through it, one time through. But Dad, you were on that with us, right? We do like little run-throughs, but it's rare to get any.
Yeah, I don't remember too many rehearsals at all, but you get great direction from the directors and producers and so on. They really know the script inside out and know what they want to get. And, you know, so it's tough that there's no rehearsal on the one hand, but on the other hand, they don't let it go until it's just right. So.
And that energy, I think, comes out in our acting too, because it's contagious.
Oh no,
We're all
it is.
excited about it.
Earlier you were talking about working together as a group, and I have to say that there's moments where the story kind of builds up, and then you see somebody sitting next to you, and all of a sudden he creates this incredible voice, and you're so mesmerized, and then there's silence, and you kind of like, oh shh! You know, and you realize it's you. It happens all the time because it's so great, that experience of everybody in the room together.
Well, and the other thing is, because there were so many characters, they could, you know, have a bunch of characters in the episode, but not all of them spoke. So, you know, I was on, there were gaps of episodes that I wasn't in, and I had to come in, and they like would give me a rundown because there were all these new characters. And I remember, you know, working with Crispin Freeman the first episode, and then the next episode he was a completely different character. And I was like, who is this? And they had to like tell me, oh yeah, he lost his arm, and he's now got this guy gave him a gun for an arm. And it was crazy because you had to prepare like what you thought, and then you'd come in and they give you a rundown of what's been going on in the show, and you'd have to.
And with it, and then you know, an incredible cast that we had to work with. You sit in a writer's room and you imagine all these words that your characters are going to say, and yeah, and then there's this period of discovery when you're actually in the booth with the actors, and they're helping you to find the characters, and they're reading your words in ways that, well, you didn't hear it that way in your head, but that's actually better. Thank you, you know? So, and then after a while, you start to hear the actors' voices in your heads when you're writing, and then you're writing for the actor that you know because you know how they're going to say it. So that process of discovery, both from writing and then exploring characters with actors, that was an incredible learning experience for me, to just watching our cast perform.
Hey guys, I'd say at least in my household, everybody is over the age of 30 and we love the hell out of that show. Now my question is regarding the end of season 2. Y'all like that is kind of like the worst lap dance ever. And there's another way that I could put it, but I think there's kids present, so. Are there any plans to wrap that up?
Well, that's what we were saying in the beginning. We're going to try not to talk about things going to happen.
All right, look, let me just say this. 2 things. 1, there's no end, ever. I just did a gargoyles panel this morning. It's been 20 years. We're still not done. So this notion of wrapping up, get over it. Because even if we got more episodes or we got more issues of the Young Justice comic book, or we found some way, movie, whatever, to tell more stories, and by the way, nothing would please Brandon and myself and probably everybody else on this table, except maybe Wilcox, more than to be able to go back and do more of this. We'd love to. It's not up to us. There are no current plans, but we are constantly pitching it. I mean, we pitched Black Manta Celebrity Hot Tub. We pitched Young Justice Meets Scooby-Doo. We pitched movies, spin-offs, everything. We haven't given up on it. I don't want you guys to give up on it either. But I also don't want to lie to you. Warner Brothers, Cartoon Network, DC does not have any current plans to do more with the show. But even if they did, the notion that we would do something that would tie up all loose ends and it would be over, never going to happen. The whole idea of the show is life goes on, and so we'd love to do more adventures, more stories, all that. But if we got to the end of that group of stories, you'd be, you know, if we got to season 3, when it was over, you'd be going, well, where's season 4? You ended on a cliffhanger. Which, by the way, we did not end on a cliffhanger. All you people, you know, we left loose threads for sure on purpose, but that was not a cliffhanger by any definition.
Yeah, I mean, obviously everybody knows Wally's just fine, right?
green shirt? How involved was DC with you guys picking which characters you could use, or like how far you guys could go? Like how involved was DC with you guys?
During season 1, there were literally, I think, 4 characters that were off limits. 2 of them were Wonder Girl. The Donna Troy and the Cassie Says. And I don't know why. We never really heard what the reasons were why we could or couldn't use them, but I guess it had something to do with legalities or something. By the end of the season, there was a new regime in DC, basically, at which point nobody was off limits anymore. Now, it was too late in season 1 to put Donna Troy in. So we had plans to put Donna Troy and Mary Marvel into season 2, but then Phil wimped out. No, we had them in the wedding shower. We had Donna Troy and Mary Marvel at the wedding shower. I don't know if you remember that.
And I think I broke the news to you on like a conference call, so it was really cold-blooded. I was like, yeah, no, we don't have time, Greg, sorry. But they didn't have any lines, so
yeah,
you know, we had to cut somewhere, and you know, Wilcox was giving me that look, like, do it now, you know, break his heart. So sorry, Greg. It was Dave, man. It was Dave.
Cut him now, cut him clean.
Well, and to be fair,
you, Wilcox.
To be fair, it would have been hard because we would have had to see them in civilian clothes and in their superhero costumes. It meant creating 4 models for 2 characters who had no lines and who you'd never met before. If we had had them in that episode, then they could have been in that huge lineup in the very last episode, and we would have put them in there because we already had the designs. And 40 characters clearly wasn't enough for me. Literally 40 superheroes that we put in a row there. But we would have had 42, but we never got those built. But DC were great partners on the show. In fact, the whole idea of doing the Reach at All was Mike Carlin's idea, who was our liaison with DC. And we knew we were doing an alien invasion, but there's so many DC alien races, and we hadn't landed. We knew we were going to do the Krolatanes as sort of the tease, but we weren't sure what the big menace was going to be until Mike said, well, you got Blue Beetle in the show, why don't you do the Reach? And it was like, oh yeah, that's good. So that's how we got Black Beetle and all those characters. Phil Lamar isn't in this room, but he's wandering these halls somewhere, and he was the Reach ambassador and Green Beetle and Aquaman, and he's around here somewhere. So you see Phil, ask him why he didn't show up to the panel. I don't know.
I just want to say, Young Justice is a really, really good show, and being an aspiring voice actor myself, just listening to you guys talk about your process and all of that stuff, that is amazing to me. I want to be you guys when I grow up.
Well, what's worked for me as a voice actor is to produce the show and then cast myself so that no one... even then, I actually wanted to play Red Tornado, and Brandon's like, no.
You're going to settle for Jeff Bennett? Well, jeez, oh man.
Well, I'm a big fan of a lot of the stuff that you guys have done as far as voice actors and everything. I follow different people's careers, especially you, Mr. Keaton, Josh Keaton. You by far have been my favorite Spider-Man.
Thank you very much.
I'll take no offense to that.
That's a different panel. It's that's at 2:30, so hold that.
I'll be there too.
Please.
But I just wanted to say that, and I'm a really big fan of the show. I'm a very big fan of you guys' work. Keep doing what you're doing. I'm pretty sure in the future I'll be a fan of something else as well.
Questions? Anyone else with any questions? I saw lots of questions. I saw lots of hands.
Even weird ones.
Okay. Well, I guess we can.
Can we ask them questions?
Go right ahead. Go right ahead, you get to go first. I guess I had another question for the writers in general. Like, when you have a situation, I know that the artists are the ones that this may fall on when you have a situation like Greg said, there are 40 characters in an episode. When I guess Greg chooses who is going to be on there, but do the writers have a choice of which little lines to throw and how much shaping do the writers do you have in terms of just throwing lines?
Oh, the writers have a lot to do with the shaping. Like I was saying earlier, I think Greg and Kevin and I come up with a lot of the broad strokes, but it's up to the writing staff to really help us fill in what's in between and build the characters and come up with charming moments for them that are unique to each one. And that's a lot of work. It takes a lot of skill to do that sort of thing, especially on the deadlines that David Wilcox keeps us all on. So that is a challenge. But
and on the other
there's
side,
lots of love for David today.
and on the other side of that, for the actors, did you guys get to come in with your notions of who your characters were, even if not just from the start?
Hell no. No,
you know what I'm going to ask? If there was a lot of
there's no improvising.
No improvising.
No, very, very tight shit. You say what's on the page.
Okay.
Right?
We want to make sure we always make sure we've got an as-written take. But yeah, if an actor feels like vamping, we're open to hearing what they got. We may go back and use what's written, but if it's good, we'll use it. We're open to whatever. If it's funny, particularly if it's funny, and yet not too blue, I'm going to say. We had a couple of double entendres in there, but we've got to be careful from an S&P standpoint. But and that was the problem. A lot of the ad-libbing gets pretty blue. So we didn't use a lot of the ad-libbing because a lot of the cursing and a lot of the sexual innuendo we're not always allowed to use. So and it gets that way in the booth a lot, often, all the time.
Yeah, I always say that you should roll on all that stuff and make a show of that. A voice actor sitting in a room and what goes on, because voice actors, especially the girls, are the biggest potty mouths ever.
The girls are way worse than we are.
Yeah.
And that's saying quite a lot.
Yeah. Young Justice, Forbidden Hours. But we say it all in fun voices.
Yeah. When you talk about ad-libs, a lot of times everybody thinks about it, the comedy and getting used to your character is kind of a way for you to get into your skin, even if that's not what they use in the take. It's a way for you to get into the skin of the character. But also, there was not a huge tendency to want to ad-lib lines that you thought would make it in the show, because I think the show was so well written. There was not really a lot of need for that. On some shows if they're going for comedy or whatever it is, that they need actors to bring that element of their game. But on this show, to be perfectly honest, it was so well written, you almost, as an actor, wanted to say exactly what they said and make it hit, because it was so well done. That's just something about it.
That was, thank you. That was very, very hard to craft all of that. So about the ad-libbing, I mean, from every level, it became very difficult to contribute to this. Once the script was kind of written, I think, as you know, the arcing in the show was very heavy. There's a lot of through lines that we were tracking and a lot of subtleties with every character, and things that they would say, and a character would say in one episode would come back, maybe have a new meaning in a later episode, or maybe it would have new meaning for you when you watched it a second time. And it's a lot of fun for us to craft all of that in there, but it also made it more challenging to produce in terms of being able to freestyle as you go, whether it be drawing certain things, storyboarding certain things, acting and ad-libbing in the acting, It was very difficult. And then tracking all of that through every stage in production, also very difficult, especially on the deadlines that David Wilcox keeps us on. So, just throwing that up one more time.
Yeah, I was just wondering, you'd asked the actors about their influences and like how much they were into. I was wondering about the artists and the writers that they could speak to, like classic comic storylines that they, I mean, obviously some of them are going to be pretty obvious from the storylines of the show, but other influences that they brought to the show from stuff that they've read.
So again, a lot of times it really comes from like Greg and Brandon. They'll have an idea, the basic characters, and then I'll be in a room with them and the other writers and just try to make it go. But really the startup really started with Greg and Brandon deciding what they want. Because Greg, on all the shows I've worked with him, he always plans out not just the first season, I think like maybe 6 down. So like I'm sure he has, if this show went for 4 or 5 more seasons, he already has it worked out.
I think, you know, a lot of the DC stuff too came from Greg. I mean, the DC universe just lives and breathes inside Greg's head. And it was, I had never seen this before in the years I've been working in animation. I mean, Greg had worked out an incredible timeline for the DC universe. Birthdays, in some cases, death days for a lot of the characters, so that we could track all of that as we were writing the stories. He would have a timeline that we could look at and see how our stories fell in that timeline. So,
yeah, I think by the end of it was like 187 pages or something, that the timeline. It starts with, I think the earliest thing on it was Vandal Savage being attacked by a cave bear, which was Phil Barrasa's idea. And then it goes into the future. I think the last thing on it is Impulse coming back in time from the future. So it ran at least from that point. And we sort of had to figure out the whole Golden Age and the whole Silver Age for Earth 16, which was our version of the DC universe, because we wanted to make sure it all tracked. And then the biggest pain in the ass, and it was my idea, so it's my own damn fault, but the biggest pain in the ass in the entire show were those timestamps. Because all the different time zones and everything, it was a lot of math, and I'm not good at math. I'm an English major. I shouldn't have to do all this damn math. But I thought the timestamps would be a good idea, and then, of course, I was stuck figuring them out all the time. And it was a huge pain.
Greg is super popular with executives because they love reading 200-page story Bibles. Is that right, Greg?
Yeah, not so much.
Yeah, I was printing out the materials for this show, and I just put it on the printer, and I didn't look at how long it was. And not only did I have to go buy more paper, I had to buy more toner.
One of my favorite things in the show was like some little nuances in the writing, actually. So I don't know. My question is, whose idea was it to put things like staying whelmed or I love that.
The whelm thing was actually something I worked out with my kids. It was something that we used to joke about, about the actual line, how come people are overwhelmed and underwhelmed, how come nobody is ever just whelmed, is something that I talked about with my son and daughter. And I thought, that's perfect for Dick Grayson. In other words, Dick would be the kind of guy who would question the very language that he's using, and wonder about it. And then once he did it once, he'd then become fascinated with the whole subject. So we called them unwords, and we did these unwords all through season 1. And then in season 2, it's 5 years later, he's 19 now, we just figured by then he'd be kind of over it on the one hand. So he wasn't doing it anymore, but 2 or 3 of the best ones had been sort of like so permeated the culture of the team that they were still being used, but not by him anymore, but by other characters. So you'd have other characters saying feel the aster or whelmed or stuff like that because they weren't even thinking about it anymore. It was just part of the thing. And then we did the whole thing with Impulse and his sort of future slang, which the future slang, this is really ironic, but you know, that whole thing about feel the mode and stuff like that, that was, you know, when I was in high school in the 70s, that was slang that we used in my high school, and I thought, and no one knew it. I don't know how local it was, but feel the mode and moded and crash and all that, that was stuff we used in 75 or 78 in my high school. So we used it as future slang. It was actually from the distant past.
Some of your previous series, Greg, you introduced a lot of like Shakespeare with Gargoyles and with Spectacular Spider-Man. Was there any plans to do that in Young Justice down the road, or had you like kind of stepped back?
If there were, yeah, I mean, nothing specific. I mean, the big problem was it's always, you know, you want it to be organic. Gargoyles, that was easy. Spider-Man, it wasn't that hard because we were at a high school, so the notion of them, you know, doing a play made sense, and that was a good way for us to do that. In Young Justice, you know, fitting Shakespeare in, which is something that I always want to do because I'm a huge Shakespeare fanboy.
Alas, poor Kid Flash.
Yeah,
well.
you know,
I took care of it for him on YouTube.
Yeah, that's
Everybody
right.
seen
You
that?
did. That's true.
You guys didn't see that? Raise your hand if you've seen the Kid Flash YouTube Shakespeare thing. Not that many people. Wow.
Look for it. It's fantastic.
If we shadows have offended, think but this, and all is mended, that you did but slumber here whilst these visions did appear. And this weak and idle theme no more yielding than a dream, babe. Fandom, do not reprehend. If you pardon, we will mend. And as I am an honest kid, I think of all the things we did now to escape the serpent's tongue. We will make amends ere long, else Kid Flash a live call. So, good night unto you all. Give us your hands if we be friends, and Robin shall restore amends.
We really should end on that note. I know we got 5 more minutes, but that was so great.
I'm a Shakespeare fan.
Questions, but you know, this is the Young Justice panel right here, so let's give it up for him.
There's a signing. Did they?
There is a signing that's happening in the exhibit area at the end of the 100 aisle. And you know, exhibit, there's a big signing section there. And actually, I have a few Young Justice Blu-rays from season 2 talking about. Yes, 1, 2, 3. For the people that ask questions, sorry. But yeah, so the panel.
So a lot of these people, maybe not literally everyone, because some of us have other panels or things, but a lot of these people will be signing from 2 to 3 o'clock at the in the signing area on the exhibit floor. So if you want signatures, that's the place to go.